Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So today is a little bit of an emotional one. It was the last race of the season. It was the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix of 2024. In case you're not listening to this in 2024. It's kind of sad. I know we've had issues throughout the season of like, we are tired. We can't imagine how the drivers are feeling. Like, we're exhausted from everything. The length of this season is kind of crazy looking back, and the fact that like Carlos had his appendix removed at the beginning of this season when that feels like it was 4 years ago. And like Max only won, he didn't win the majority of the races this season. Like, there was a lot that happened, which I'm not complaining about because as a spectator watching the sport, you never know what's going to happen. So that's really awesome. I'm interested to see how 24 races goes again next year. Or is it 25 next year?
I honestly can't remember. I'll have to double check. But it's going to be another long season. I think there's been like a weird kind of vibe throughout like some of the teams, and so some of the endings have been lackluster. I mean, starting with Alpine, it's
Ocon.
It's been that's been such a weird season for them, and and then I think about like guys that have been on the grid for a while, like Kevin Magnussen, and and Valtteri Bottas, that this is it for probably ever.
Yeah.
And so there's like a mourning period, because then there's people like Joe who, he had 2 seasons and this could be it. We've seen so many short careers in F1. So I think it's just like such a turning of like, it's such a big season change, and it's really our first full season as spectators.
Especially because last season there wasn't any change from the
we
ending
were very
grid.
lucky with that. Like, that was historical, because that doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
And so we were really lucky that we got people for 2 seasons, and we kind of like got used to this. But I think this is just unfortunately the name of the game, that, there's going to be someone that's on the grid this year that's not going to be on the grid, in 2026. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's just, bittersweet too, because then you have big moves like Lewis to Ferrari and Carlos to Williams. There's some big changes for, big stars. And so, yeah, it was definitely an emotional weekend watching. They definitely fluffed up all the pieces, like did all the in memory of moments.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
And then I think, it was kind of nail biting for, a constructors champion perspective. So, yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster of a finale.
Oh, 100%.
So,
So before we get into the track info and the normal race recap, there's a little bit of news I just want to go over quickly.
Your first note, sorry, it's not funny, but it's just the fact that we have to mention it.
So MC's laughing at the first note and the fact that we have to mention that Max is gonna be a father.
Which, like, congratulations, like, super excited for them. Wish them all the best. I think the thing was there's just, it was like that morning started with like Max is gonna be a father, and it was just like boom, boom, boom with news in F1. And so it was just like, what is happening? Things are chaotic. So,
and it was the morning after the drivers' dinner too, where like they all go to the end of year dinner.
Yeah, because him and George's, butting heads is coming to, I don't know what it came to.
I don't know what it came. I think it dropped, honestly.
But like they were, adding fuel to that fire throughout the beginning of the weekend, and so
apparently all the drivers thought it would be really funny to have George, who showed up last, to try to sit him next to Max, and they left the only empty seat next to Max, and George took that seat and brought it all the way to the other side of the table.
I mean, hey,
he really did not want to sit next to Max. My next thing is some good news. So although Kevin Magnussen is leaving F1, he did announce this week that he will be driving for BMW in their M Hybrid V8 LMDH car, which competes in the World Endurance Championship and IMSA, I believe. So we will see him next year in a car, just not in F1, but that's still very exciting to see that he has something to do. Sorry, guys, that was literally so disgusting. I am sick and cannot breathe, apparently. Gross. Um, Graham, I think that's how you say his name. Loden was announced as team principal of the Cadillac F1 program. So he also was the team principal in the past of Virgin, Marussia, and Manor F1. So he does have experience as an F1 team principal. So it's interesting to see who they keep getting on their roster for the team.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's shakeups in every team, so it'll be interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So
The last thing is, and it added more fuel was added to it this weekend. Checo, the talks of Checo not having a seat next year continued into this weekend, especially the beginning of the weekend, and now definitely at the end, which, if you did not watch the race, just so you know, Checo DNF'd the race after, like, not even a full lap.
yeah.
So definitely unfortunate for him. We'll talk more about that probably at the end, but that was definitely something that people were discussing at the beginning of the weekend. So, okay. That's all the news that I have. So I think we are going to go into the track info now.
All right. So the official race name for this weekend was the Formula One Etihad Airways Abu Dhabi Grand Prix 2024. The track name is the Yas Marina Circuit. They started doing F1 Grand Prix here in 2009. And the circuit length is 5.281 kilometers or 3.281 miles. The lap record prior to this weekend was placed in 2021 by Max. He did that in a Red Bull, obviously, and that lap was done in 1 minute 26.103 seconds. The new lap record as of this weekend was placed, obviously, in 2024 by Kevin Magnussen in a Haas, and he did it in 1 minute and 25.637 seconds. So, super excited to see that record, change. No offense to Max, but
Especially for K-Mag.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was his last, hurrah. So the race distance for this race was 306. Did I say that already? Yes, I did. I said the race distance already. Sorry, I'm reading double notes. So the DRS zones at this track, there are two. DRS detection zone 1 is after turn 4, and activation begins after turn 5. And then DRS detection zone 2 is after turn 7, and activation began at turn 8. So, I believe there's like specific areas that are not catered to passing, so there are certain like moments where the drivers do get stuck. There are certain corners that are more favorable, and then a lot of the pundits were talking about how like the pit exit or the pit entry, I can't remember which one.
Exit. It's underneath.
It's like a hidden one.
Yeah, it's like a little tunnel.
And it's like not the best layout from my understanding.
For spectators.
Okay.
But like, it's fine for the drivers. There's no issue with the drivers.
Okay.
For spectators, people want to see the cars at all times.
Okay.
And so that's what they were saying.
Okay. But yeah, that is where we are this weekend.
Okay, we are going to go into practice.
I think like we saw last year, Abu Dhabi P1 tends to be filled with rookies. I think every single F1 car has to have like a certain amount of rookie sessions done.
Apparently it's only one session, but I felt like it was two.
I thought it was like 3.
No, it's two. I thought it
Maybe
was
I'm thinking,
two.
because I knew Ollie did like an extended amount. Like he was specific. I don't know.
I don't think
Um,
there's technically a maximum, but at minimum, I think this year it was a 1.
I don't know. But because of that, there are always more rookies in this practice session. It's just kind of like the last opportunity to do it. Plus, at this point a lot of the teams know where they stand. Um so there were six rookies in this practice session. Ryo Kirikawa was in Oscar's McLaren. Arthur Leclerc was in Carlos's Ferrari. Isaac Hadjar was in Max's Red Bull. Felipe Drugovich was in Lance's Aston. Ayumu Iwasa was in Yuki's V-Carb. And then Luke Browning was in Alex's Williams. So a lot of different names on the practice schedule. This session was historical since it's the first time that brothers had participated as teammates on the grid. So Charles didn't start the session right away since there appeared to be battery issues with his car. So all of a sudden, like, the pundits started to kid around that, like, this, like, historical moment that's been, like, set up by Ferrari, like, it's been this big press deal, like, this really big, like, historical moment for them. We're all joking, like, what if it doesn't happen? Because, like, Charles's issues with his
Yeah.
Ferrari.
Well, and apparently, so at the beginning of FP2, who was it? One of the pundits. Will, he said that people were commenting on F1 TV's post afterwards, being like, this isn't the first time we've actually had brothers drive in a session together. And he was like, that is not incorrect. We have had brothers drive in a session together. It was the Fittipaldi brothers back in like the 70s. They drove in a session together, but that was not a world championship recognized race.
Oh, okay, so it was a non-champion. Okay,
Yeah,
makes
because at
sense.
that point they would have races that were
Yeah,
non-championship. So this is the first world championship race that we had
it's
brothers
the
in a
first
session.
like official F1
Yeah,
race.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Charles obviously eventually got on the grid and made history. But besides that, there was a bit of traffic complaints since all the rookies were on the grid. I feel like this is just typical when it
Isaac
happens.
was really frustrated.
Yeah, he was having a lot of issues. Apparently, it was dealing with like his leg was in the way of something. Like because he's in.
The wheel, it was literally the steering
Yeah,
wheel.
because there's only so much fitting they can do when it's someone else's car, like be the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean it wouldn't be the end of the issues for Red Bull though, unfortunately. So the top 5 for that session was Charles, Lando, Lewis, George, and Pierre. Um, Practice 2, the only thing of mention was that at this point, it was announced that Charles was handed a 10-place grid drop for exceeding the allocation of energy stores. And honestly, this felt like it put the media through a tizzy. Like, all of a sudden, everyone was like, and there goes, like, like, this could throw
Which
the
we should
constructors.
learn from this, guys, that it's not over till it's over.
Yeah. So, there was extra pressure on qualifying for Charles, and we'll get to how that turns out.
Well, I can't remember if it was FP1 or FP2, but Franco, on like the last turn, did go a little too wide on it, and then ended up like scraping up the bottom of his car, and he ended up going into the Williams garage. And quite when we say that like this is the end of the season, the cars are falling apart. This was not a joke. They Will called it silver tape or like reflective tape. It was duct tape. They were actually duct taping the car, and like I think they were laying underneath it using duct tape, which was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. But alas, he didn't finish the race, but
Yeah, I think that's just the way the cookie was crumbling.
it's hard to base his performance off of the last few races, because I think some of them have been quite literally just bad luck and not his fault. And then some of them have been the car is actually duct taped together.
Yeah, I think this is one of those unfortunate situations where he was kind of handed this opportunity, but he was given an opportunity that was just like had no money. At this point, they had done so much recovery from, unfortunately, like crashes from when Logan was on the team. And, not only Logan, but also Alex. And so there was just probably not as many funds and probably not as much room for mistakes. And unfortunately, like,
He did make some
he did
mistakes.
make some. I do think it's crazy seeing the emotional whiplash. I mean, we went from everyone sitting here being like, who is this kid? Why are they bringing up? To then sitting here being like, he's the greatest thing since like I don't know what, but like since
And
sliced
then
bread. And then
Will
Will
Buxton,
Buxton this weekend being like, the shine's really worn from Colapinto. It's just like, whoa, 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 you guys. Like, you sat here, you shat on like the idea of him, then you raised him up, and now you're just tearing him back down. And it's just crazy to witness
yeah.
the fact that like this is a kid who made a few mistakes, but you know what? At the end of the day, he scored points.
Yeah.
Like, he had momentum, and he got more attention to Williams than they've had in a while.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Shame on, like, the way that was handled.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that.
It just, like, felt...
Icky?
Yeah, the whole, like... Just the whole outlook on him. Not only from, like, the pundits and their
I
comments
think
were
it's like
from...
that with everything in F1 though.
Yeah.
Like when you're up, you're on top of the world, and when you're down, you
Yeah.
are underneath. You are the dirt underneath someone's boot.
Yeah, I mean, like, another example is, like, Danny, like, look at how, like, the mighty have fallen. Like,
Yeah.
it's just... I think it's just so frustrating to watch, because it's, like...
Because what, Danny had just over half of the races of the season, and he scored more points in the driver's championship than Liam did.
Yeah.
Liam had 4 points. Liam tied with Franco.
Yeah.
It was either he tied with Franco or Joe or something. Like, or all three of them might have tied. So it's just wild to see how the outlook is so different. Like, now they're like, Liam Lawson is so good, he's going to be replacing Checo at Red Bull next year. But then Danny is the worst driver ever. Like, it's just the inconsistent love and hatred for them is insane.
Yeah. I don't know if I went over the top 5 for practice 2, but I'll quickly do it again. So 1 was Lando, 2 was Oscar, 3 was Nico, 4 was Carlos, and 5 was Lewis. I have to say, I feel like Nico had like a pretty decent performance this weekend.
Yeah.
And then practice 3, there was a moment where there was a bit of smoke coming from Carlos's car. He went back into the garage and everything seemed fine, so there was that. And then Max had been struggling in P2 and seemingly continued to struggle complaining about his brakes. Like, he just seemed to be having a huge amount of issues handling the car. I don't know if it was just the way it was rebuilt or, I don't believe they did anything, like did a upgrade or anything
don't think
to the
so.
car. So that was just like interesting to see. So the top 5 for that was 1 Oscar, 2 Lando, 3 Lewis, 4 Max, and 5 Carlos. So
something interesting that did happen during a practice session was V-Carb did pull out a new front wing that they were trying out, and then they ended up putting on the old one for the actual for qualifying and the race. So we're all pretty sure that that was probably just a test for next year's car. So we'll see if they end up having that front wing on there at some point next year for a race. So I think we can get into qualifying now.
Cool. Quali 1 started with Checo putting in a pretty decent lap, which was really exciting to see because there's been all these rumors swirling. And then that top lap was very quickly deleted for exceeding track limits. They replayed this video, it felt like 10 or 12 times, and every single time Emma felt like he had exceeded track limits. She was yelling at the TV.
Well, later on, Oscar ends up doing the same thing, and
And
because they had already said that Checo got hit, because eventually they give his time
yeah,
back.
they
They allow him to
later
have it.
reinstated it and he moved
They
on
do
to
the same
third.
thing for Oscar, and so I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just not seeing it, and I guess they're correct. But like visually, as a spectator, both of them had all four tires over the white line at once. DC was convinced that they were in, and Alex Jakes was like, "All right, sure." Like Alex Jakes was also with me, and I was like, "Thank you." I don't see it, but alas.
Yeah, so this was basically it was deleted and then it was put back onto the board, so that time put him in third. Valtteri Bottas was shockingly able to put in a really great lap, which put him in first for a moment, and that again was like a shock to everyone. And then I don't know, it wasn't Bottas who hit the barrier that ended up going underneath Lewis's car.
I think it was K Mag.
Yeah, so like K-Mag ended up, or someone ended up hitting one of the plastic like safety cones or safety like poles. And basically it went perfectly under Lewis's car and was dragging his entire final fast lap.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, Lewis was only able to qualify 18th. And so he was knocked out of his
Yeah.
last
Wasn't
qualifying
great.
in a Mercedes. It was painful. It was just like so unfair. It was not the way we wanted to see it end, especially because like the Mercedes was doing pretty okay.
Yeah.
So knocked out in qualifying one was Alex Albon, Zhou Guanyu, Lewis Hamilton, Franco Colapinto, and Jack Doohan. Oh yeah, that's another thing I haven't even mentioned. It was Jack Doohan's
debut.
debut weekend. So,
Mhm.
with the Esteban Ocon departure that was announced a few days ago, Jack got put into the car early as he'll be the second driver or the additional
Second
Alpine.
driver.
Yeah, he'll be there next year. So yeah, he's on the grid. Q2, Max put in a good enough time that he felt confident enough to get out of the car and remove his helmet, not going out for another lap after his first like fast lap. Um, Hulkenberg again was able to put in an awesome lap and was able to move up to P2. Charles was able to put in a fast lap, moving up to P1, but this was deleted, pushing him down to P13. And then he wasn't able to get in a better time. And so this basically put him dead last since we talked about it earlier. He had that 10 place grid penalty. So there was basically this started the conversation in the paddock of whether he would basically upgrade the components in his car and take the pit lane penalty since he's already dead last, or if he would just start dead last with the car that he has. Ultimately, Ferrari decided to just start him dead last. That he would start on the grid, which, like I think it was Will or Hinchcliffe discussed that this actually ended up benefiting Charles
Yeah.
because we'll discuss it when we get there, but because of what happens at the beginning of the race. Um, so the other exciting and the final exciting note from Q2 was that Bottas was able to move up to P9, thus going to Q1 or Q3. So knocked out was Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson, Lance Stroll, Charles Leclerc, and Kevin Magnussen. Finally in Q3, Max almost crashed into the wall at the last corner on his first lap, and this kind of like shook everyone.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Emma, I think, gasped. Oscar's lap time was deleted, so he was down in P9. But Lando had put in the fastest lap and was sitting there comfortably, and no one could get close to him. I think this is the last time that they then reinstated, correct?
I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember. I didn't write anything about it, but Hulk was able to put in the fastest lap to the entertainment of everyone, and this is also at the moment we were watching when Emma was like, "Can you imagine Nico Hulkenberg starting on pole position for the final like race
It
of
would
the
have been
year?"
amazing.
Unfortunately, Oscar then took pole, and then Lando then took pole.
Unfortunately and fortunately.
Fortunately, yeah. So the top 10 grid positions ended up being 1 Lando, 2 Oscar, 3 Carlos, 4 Hulkenberg, 5 Max, 6 Pierre, 7 George, 8 Fernando, 9 Bottas, and 10 Checo. And then in between qualifying the race, there were a bunch of penalties that ended up getting passed down. So Hulkenberg dropped from 4th to 7th since he overtook cars in the pit lane during the qualifying sessions. Charles was in 19th since we talked about that 10th place grid penalty. And then Alex was in P18 and Franco was in P20 since they were penalized for additional gearbox components. So just a few changes to the grid. I didn't write down what the final like 20 people on the grid was. But yeah.
Okay. And now we are going to get into the actual race. Everyone started the race on medium tires except for Lewis, who had started on hards, which I think that we were questioning the decision because the Mercedes have definitely had a hard time with hard tires.
It also just felt like, why are we risking it? Like, why are we being different right now?
Yeah, but it definitely paid off for Lewis in the end.
Yeah.
I think it was Lewis's like knowledge and experience actually working this time, where sometimes I don't think it necessarily has. The start happens and Lando does have a good start, and we have a McLaren 1-2 off the start. And Oscar does not have as good of a start as Lando does. Max tries to go in on the inside of Oscar, and he thinks that he's in front at the apex of the turn. He is in fact not. And he hits Oscar. Oscar did give him enough room, it looked like, to everybody. But he still hit Oscar, spun Oscar around. Oscar ended up re-entering the track in dead last, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And during all of this,
And Max sped away. Max
yeah,
was able to just move on.
get back. During all of this / before, this green all lights go out, and Yuki's car basically just stalled. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. And people had to go around him, and he ended up coming towards actually starting in dead last then because of that. When Oscar had re entered the track, it was behind Yuki. Right after this / before, around the same time all of this is happening, Checo was spun around as well. This was because Bottas had slightly hit him, and so Checo spun around as well, stopping on track, which caused a VSC, virtual safety car, and this caused Checo to retire. Didn't continue the race.
Mm-hmm. And that was the moment
that we were like, well, he's not coming back next year.
Yeah.
Hinch in an earlier session, he had said, yeah, Checo says that he has a contract that he intends to drive for next year, but contracts mean nothing in this sport. And if
he's like, I don't like it, but
he was like, I've had contracts too, and they haven't worked out. So I just don't, after this, I just don't think that Checo's gonna have a spot, which really sucks. That Red Bull does this stuff where he could have had the opportunity to race for another team and they re-signed him, even though they really had no intention to actually keep him unless he performed perfectly. And they just kind of screwed him for next year.
Yeah.
It's just annoying that Red Bull takes a long time to make decisions and they don't honor contracts to... The contracts mean nothing to them, truly. And at this point, the order was Lando, Carlos, Pierre, George, and then Hulkenberg. Charles in the start had gained 11 places, so
Mm-hmm.
this is where starting on the grid rather than in the pit lane actually really benefited him.
Yeah.
So he was able to make it into the top 10 literally off of the start. The VSC ended on lap 3, and basically right after that, Oscar ends up hitting the rear of Franco's Williams.
It was like, what is going on? It felt like we were watching just, I don't want to say a track of rookies, but it was just like, this is the final race, guys.
Yeah, and so much is at stake. Like when Oscar got spun around, it was like, oh my gosh, Ferrari actually has a chance now. But then I looked at the standings and I was like, okay, in order for
Yeah,
Ferrari to
Emma started
win,
doing math.
I was like, Ferrari to win right now with Lando in first is not possible. They would have to actually take him out in order for it to happen, and they would both have to finish the race. So obviously, it did not happen. Yeah, Oscar ended up hitting the rear of Franco's Williams, and it caused damage to Oscar's car, obviously. And Oscar ended up going into the pit, and when he was exiting the pit, that's when he actually found out that Max had gotten a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with him. It didn't really matter because eventually Oscar got a 10-second time penalty for hitting Franco.
Yeah.
But that's what happens
That's the
when
way
you
the
hit
cookie
people.
crumbles.
Bottas was given a penalty for hitting Checo at this point, which again makes sense. Lap 8, Charles was just like a man on a mission. He was flying, and he just kept passing people. By lap 11, Lando had a 3.4-second lead on Carlos, and they were unsure if he was just stuck at that pace or if he was just managing his tires. I think he was just managing his tires, just trying to make sure that there weren't any problems. Charles then started to pass Hulk for 5th place. Lap 13 and 14 is when people started to pit. Because a lot of people started on mediums, if they were going to switch to hards, it was going to be between like lap 13/14 to like somewhere in the 30s if they were really pushing the mediums.
Yeah.
K-Mac had a really slow stop. I couldn't remember how long it was, but it was not great. And then at this point, George was chasing Pierre for, what was it, 4th, I think it was. And so Pierre ended up going into the pit to get new tires. And Joe was given a 5-second penalty for false start, which I didn't even see that.
That was rough.
Yeah, it's just let the guy. This one, there's
Like,
sometimes
give
where I'm
him
like,
one.
leave him alone at this
Yeah.
point, which they really can't because there's a penalty after the race that was like, bruh, what?
Yeah.
Lap 17, Lando is saying his tires are feeling okay, so he's like, I can keep going like this, and he does for a little while. Pierre ends up passing Yuki for P8 at this because he had come out, so he was a little bit further back on the grid. And lap 21, we see Charles go into pit and he was like one of the first front runners to go in and pit. And he comes back out in 8th place. The lap 27 order, so the order of the first few, is Lando, Carlos, George, Max, and then Lewis. Max was also working his way up the grid. At this point, Lewis had also moved up quite a bit as well. Liam Lawson goes in to pit and get new tires.
Oh, this is painful.
This was painful to watch. So he goes in and gets new tires. The front left, you see, they do the replay of the pit stop. You see the guy who's kneeling on the ground, in the front by the front left tire. You see that there's like a little jerk right there. Like he can tell that it's not fully on, and he doesn't have the chance to be like, no, stop.
It was like everyone kind of messed up, and like I think Liam pulled away too fast. Like the guy might not have pulled the gun away. Like, but it seemed like it hadn't fully finished tightening the bolts in the tire.
Yeah, And he goes out onto the track and he's like, my front left tire isn't on properly. And when they showed the video, like from his perspective, you can definitely see it wobbling a bit.
Well, and then there's a different perspective and you see sparks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he ends up going back into the pit.
And they fix it.
And
you can see that, like, almost immediately that it needed to be fixed.
Yeah. So I'm sure that there's going to be long conversations in VCARB about that.
Yeah.
Lando then pitted, and it was a 2-second pit stop, which was phenomenal, and he came out still in the lead, I believe it was, because Carlos had pitted right before him, and so Carlos had come out, like, in second-ish or something like that, and so by the time that Lando came out, there was enough of a gap for him to come back out and be okay. And now was the devastating moment when we found out that Franco was told to retire the car. Nothing was telling me online why he retired the car. Did you see anything?
I think there was probably damage from when Oscar might have hit him, like, to one of the rear tires.
Because he was struggling. Like, that, once Oscar hit him, he could not move up.
I think there was probably damage in the hit.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Lap 30, we see Max pit, and he was and that's when he served his penalty, and he ended up coming out in P11. Lap 31, Bottas locked up, causing K-Mag to run into him, and that caused Bottas to have a puncture. Was not great. He went back into the pit and retired, sadly. Definitely not the way that anybody really wanted to see Valtteri Bottas retire or
especially
end the
after
race.
His qualifying performance. Like, I think it was just so frustrating.
Yeah.
That it was, like, seriously, like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Lap 33, we see Oscar pit, and that's when he served his penalty, which brought him back out into the race in P15.
Like, it was like 15, 14.
Yeah, so he was going to have to work his way down. It's only lap 33, though, and the race was like 54 laps or something like that.
7, I think.
Yeah, so he had time. Lap 35, Lewis goes in to finally pit. He's the last person to finally pit, and he comes out in P7 on mediums this time. Lap 41, we actually see Lewis pass Hulk for P6, and then after he passes Pierre for 5th. And at this point, Lewis asked how far ahead George was, and George was 14 seconds ahead of him, and Toto comes on the radio and he goes, Lewis, you can do that.
Yeah, because Lewis was like 14 seconds. Like, he couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and Lewis did. He ended up doing it, obviously, which is kind of crazy. Oscar did narrowly avoid a big moment at turn 12 at this point. I think he had just gone a little too wide, and it was just not, he ended up figuring it out. Carlos was worried he had a puncture at one point, and we see the entire Ferrari pit crew come out, and they're, like, ready to change tires. And before we knew that Carlos had complained about a potential puncture, we just see the Ferrari pit crew come out. So we're like, are they trying to, like, mess with people? Like, make them think that someone's coming in? Later on, a radio message was played that Carlos was like, I think I have a puncture. And they're like, you're fine. And we think that they had sent the pit crew out to be like, okay, get ready. But they looked and it was probably fine.
Yeah.
What else? Charles had asked how far behind Carlos was from Lando. And his race engineer told him, I think at this point it was like 7-ish seconds. And you just hear nothing other than a bleep from Charles. He just cursed because he was like, well, it's done.
Yeah.
Once I saw Lando pulling away from Carlos, I was like, okay.
Because it was stuck at like 3 seconds for a while. And my biggest concern was that it would stay at 3 seconds and then, like, one or the other was going to have to start to pull or walk away.
Yeah.
And I was nervous that the Ferrari was going to end up coming on top. And it ended up just, Lando, the McLaren, could just hold the pace better.
Yeah. Toto, at this point, Lewis was getting closer to George, and so Toto went on the radio and said, George, keep it clean, please, with Lewis. And George was like, of course.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God.
It was funny at one point. Did you remember when Charles's race engineer was like, picked the pace back up, and Charles was like, I don't know what pace you're thinking,
Oh,
but this
the
is the pace.
rhythm.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was like, keep the rhythm, and he's like, this is the rhythm. Yeah, it's. I feel like, I think one of the pundits, like maybe DC said it, or well, like people need their holiday right now. People really need a break.
Yeah. Um, Towards the end of the last lap, well, on the last lap, we see Lewis end up passing George for fourth place. Clean pass, no issues. On the last lap, we also get a yellow flag come out. Leon Lawson, he was forced to pull the car over on the last lap because his car was smoking. Don't know why. Nothing was released
Yeah.
explaining what was going on. But that was the end of the race. So the race ended with Lando P1, Carlos P2, Charles P3, Lewis P4, George P5, Max P6, Pierre P7, Nico P8, Fernando P9, Oscar P10, Alex P11, Yuki P12, Joe P13, Lance P14, Jack Doohan P15, and then Kevin Magnussen P16, Liam P17, and then Bottas, Franco, and Checo with DNFs. There was a lot that I feel like happened during the race. When I was taking notes, there wasn't a ton of notes. I felt like there wasn't like
It was pretty like big clear events and then
yeah,
penalties, and I think it was just the biggest struggle about talking about this race was just how much movement there was in the grid.
yeah.
Because people would pit and then they would drop, 5, 6 spots.
Well, and even the people like Lewis and Charles who started all the way in the back who moved up like
Yeah.
13 spots.
So it was just like there was just a lot of movement, which makes it fun. Like, it was 7 a.m. for us in Central Time, and it was just, I mean, I watched the whole time. Like, there wasn't
Yeah.
a boring because sometimes, if there's like 20 minutes of really clean, easy racing,
Multitask.
Yeah, but
that was the end of that race. At the very end, when they went over to the podium, you used to have when they like park their cars and park for like some of them park in Park Ferme, the others park in the top three park in the one spot. They did have a special spot for Lewis specifically so that he could do donuts and then park, and it was really fun seeing videos after the fact of the actual like spectator view there. The entire pit wall was lined with mechanics from like every single team watching Lewis do donuts. People were like, they're acting like Lewis is retiring and he's just going to Ferrari. I think it's nice that they celebrated such like a historic partnership, and I mean, he is the legend he is because of he was always going to be a phenomenal driver, but they gave him the car that he needed to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I also think too, it's just like Lewis has been at Mercedes for 12 years. That is a long time. It feels like in the world of F1, and so, Mercedes and Lewis have probably been like a really consistent mark in like a lot of people's lives in the paddock, and so, it's probably just like there's probably like a level of admiration to like the respect and the partnership that like that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
It is abnormal to have the same driver, to have this sort of relationship with a team for this long. I mean, look at it. I mean, maybe we'll see it in the likes of, Lando and Oscar and probably Charles, but, I don't know if we'll ever see like a partnership with this level of history.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it was also just like with all of the drama that has happened with Mercedes and Lewis and Toto this year, it was really nice to see them have like a moment of like, thank you. This has been a really good season and whatnot. Toto did say on the radio because Lewis was like, I love you all, blah, blah, blah. Toto got on the radio and said, like, we love you too. If we can't win, we hope that you do.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really nice. So I think we can go into our final thoughts now.
What a doozy.
Yeah.
I think that is how to sum up 2024.
Ain't that the truth? So, in total, some stats this year. We had 24 drivers on the grid this year.
Jesus.
Um, Obviously, Max won the Drivers' Championship. The battle for second, Lando ended up coming out on top with 374 points, with Charles in third with 356.
Wow.
Yeah. There were a few ties actually. So Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo had the same number of points.
Interesting.
Yep. Zhou Guan Yu and Liam Lawson had the same number of points,
Okay.
which is very interesting to me. Um, and there were a few close calls. So like Pierre came in 10th with 42, and then Nico came in 11th with 41. Lance came in 13th with 24. Esteban came in 14th with 23. So there was a bunch of close calls. Even at the top, Oscar came in 4th with 292 points, and Carlos came in 5th with 290 points.
Jesus.
So it was very close. And then for the constructors' standings, obviously today was the final decider of who won the constructors'
Oof.
championship.
It's close.
Yes. So it was McLaren who won with 666 points, which feels like a weird number, but we're gonna move past it. The Ferrari came in second with 652 points. Red Bull came in third with 489. Mercedes came in fourth with 468. And then the significant drop down to fifth of Aston Martin with 94, which is crazy. Alpine with 65. Haas with 58 is in seventh. RB or V car, whatever you want to call them, in 8th with 46th. 9th is Williams with 17, and then Kick Sauber is in 10th with 4 points.
I mean, at least Sauber finally got on the board.
I know, I'm glad that they didn't come out with 0. I am sad that Valtteri Bottas has finished his last season in F1 potentially with 0 points. It's the first time he's ever had a season where he didn't score anything, so that's quite sad. I did really enjoy a lot of the special helmets that were made for this weekend. So, like, K-Mag had photos of him and his kid. And then, who else?
Charles had a thank you very much in
Uh,
Spanish to Carlos helmet, which Emma had thoughts about.
I thought it was interesting because I thought it was interesting how nice they were to each other this weekend, where for the last couple of weeks, Charles has made comments of, like, you're not my girlfriend. Like, he's not my girlfriend. I'm not going to miss him. He'll be 20 feet away in the paddock. Or stuff like that, where he's just, like, gotten really short and frustrated with Carlos. I've grown a lot of respect for Carlos this season. Like, even that one interview that recently came out where he's like, yeah, it was really hard for me to understand losing my spot at Ferrari. But, like, if it was anybody other than 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, I don't think I would have understood. He's like, if you have the chance to sign Lewis Hamilton, I get it. And he's like, I also understood that it was never going to be Charles. He's the project of Ferrari. Like, I knew that it was going to be me, and I understood, and I got it. And he's like, it didn't. I'm still angry, and it took me time to understand, but I finally understand. And I think that the maturity that he has had this year, that he could have been really petty with them.
I think too it's maturity that, like, I think he's really going to need going to Williams. I think that there's going to be a lot of frustration hopefully just at the beginning. There was a few comments he made over the last, like, weekend or two
Like that this is the last
time for a while he'll be on, like, the podium or, in fights like this. And so I do think he's very aware of, like, the reality of where he's going, but I do think, there's been a level of higher respect I feel like he's garnered because of just his way and his approach to some of the problems that have arisen on the team. And whereas I feel like Charles is, I don't want to say comfortable where he is at Ferrari, but I don't think that there's as much forethought as we're seeing from Carlos.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been weird. But yeah, so that was one tribute helmet. I think Joe had a tribute helmet.
Yeah,
Um,
he had photos of him and like Valtteri and his cat and like the team and everything all over it, which was cute.
who else? Did anyone
George had
else?
a helmet for Lewis where it was like a
Yes.
little cartoon of them two.
Yes.
And it was like thank you Lewis or something like that on the back, or like it's been a good time or whatever. And even in one of the like pre-shows when they have like the drivers go out on stage for the spectators, um there's that famous photo of George trying to get Lewis's
Yeah.
autograph like from 13 years ago, and George had the book and he asked Lewis to sign it on stage, and Lewis was like, did I sign the book for you?" And he was like, "Yeah, but you actually spelled my name wrong, so now I'm going to have a version where I have the correct spelling."
Oh my gosh.
um who else? I know Carlos had a full on like race suit. Even his fireproofs were a special fireproof, where on the back he had all of his podiums and wins with Ferrari on it, which was cool. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like all this shows you how much change we're in for next year. Um, I mean, I think if you just scroll through any level of F1 social media, you're gonna see how much, you know, excitement and celebration everyone has for the people that were a part of their teams.
Yeah.
Um, I know a lot of people feel like they're in mourning for certain aspects. Um,
We didn't feel this way at the end of last year because nobody was leaving.
Nobody was leaving. There wasn't any change. We were excited. It was easy.
As
But
much as I'm like, I'm ready to sleep now that the season is over, I still feel quite sad that things are changing and like some people won't be here. But then I'm also looking forward to seeing the chaos of like
new people.
new people and Lewis being teammates with Charles, and that's gonna, I fear, not be a great situation for either one of them. Um One thing that I've seen on social media recently that I'm a little frustrated by is I don't think you've seen it because we haven't spoken about this, but the negative outlook on Alex Albon.
I have seen this, but I've been ignoring it because
I've seen a lot of people say that Alex Albon is not that great of a driver and that he just has seemed great because he has had teammates who probably shouldn't have been in F1. And that next year we're going to see if he's really that great. Which I don't disagree in the sense that like next year and like Franco right now, but like we know for sure with Carlos that next year Alex is going to have a teammate where he's going to have to really compete with. But like it's not like Alex has only been with Williams, guys. Like he was on Red Bull, like, and he didn't perform horrendously.
well, I also just think like, you know, I take it with a grain of salt. The everyone that is on the Alex hate train are the same people who have dropped the excitement of Franco. You
Yeah.
know, they're the same people who are sitting here and calling George Russell an asshole, right? Like, I think it's really easy to sit here and, place the blame. I think the biggest blame is on the fact that Williams has no money and struggles as a team. They've struggled for the last, probably 10 plus years. Like, it's been rough and they're trying to reconfigure, right? I think, to be honest, I think they're handling it, in my opinion, in a way I would trust more than, the way a team like Alpine is being handled.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, I think it's really easy to hop on this train of, like, oh, Alex sucks as a driver. But you know what? Like, maybe it's the car. Maybe it's the fact that they are a team that, Carlos Sainz has flat out been, truthful in regards to where he will be on the grid next year. So like he's expecting to be in the bottom and look at where he was today. So
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to blame when, you know, when I don't know. I just let's like give everyone a break. Like I don't know, but I have seen
It's been
it.
pissing me off.
I've been kind of ignoring it. Because I've seen the whole like Alex Albon's one of the most overhyped drivers. Like, people just like him because he's nice.
Yeah.
Which like I guess is like a great compliment to him that people like him because he's nice. But I also think like you said, this is a guy who Williams is not the first team he's been on.
Yeah.
You know, I also think you have to gain respect through, actions and the
Yeah.
way he's done things I have respect for, so.
Speaking of Williams, Franco's radio message before the race actually started was very sweet. He said to the team something of the like of saying like thanks for this many races that we've been able to have together. Thank you for helping make my dreams come true. And so that's why it was even more heartbreaking to see him have to retire the car. I do hope that we get to see him again. I think that he is good, and I think that he deserves an actual chance, not just a couple of races. I think I hope that somebody ends up giving him a seat sometime soon.
It's weird. I wish there was almost like less regulation F1 races, and then I wish there was like, instead of sprints, like scratch sprints, cut off like 6 of the races of the 26 that we were at, like on like a season like this, like have like 20 races, and then have like 6 exhibition races where like a team can
Where
put
it has to
in,
be your reserve driver.
where like it doesn't even have to be a reserve driver. Like a team can just sit there and they can just pick anyone they want and like and it can be, like, and it just be the ability for, like, it would just be so exciting. I feel like it would be refreshing. Like,
Yeah.
it would be an opportunity and go through the whole weekend, right? And like obviously be like strategic about it, but like do it in a way that like it exposes.
And you don't have to, like, if you're worried about this current year's car getting destroyed in an exhibition race,
use like the
use
prior
the year
years.
before his car.
Yeah, like use the prior year's car because the team will know it, and like maybe, and because they're non-regulation, like take them out of the cost cap.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
F1, if you're listening, please try something like this. I think that would be way more exciting than watching a sprint race. Please.
Yeah, I don't know, but what do I know? I'm just drive to survive, girly.
Also, Gabriel Bartoletto, he won the F2 championship. He will be racing for Sauber, Audi, whatever you want to call it, next year. He will be Nico Hülkenberg's teammate. So it is very nice to see that the current F2 champion will be going to F1 next year, which that's great because in theory F2 is supposed to be a feeder championship to F1.
It feels like the system worked.
We're fine. Hopefully this means that we're finally getting back on track again.
Yeah.
And maybe eventually people will retire.
Well, and with the addition of
an 11
team, and
I'm very intrigued to see who they choose as their drivers.
It's American. So I'm intrigued. I'm wondering if they want Americans. If they would do like how like Audi wanted like a German driver. That's why like that was the whole thing around Nico.
That is true.
Was that like Audi wanted a German driver? So I mean, I don't want. That's not me being like we need an American. Like I would love to see them like pull someone like random,
like Franco,
or like like go like deep into the like go to like the super formula guys, or like don't pull from like the mainstream pool. It'd be cool if they. Or it'd be cool if they did like a reversal where they pulled from like the IndyCar guys.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know.
That's how Pato O'Ward gets into F1.
That'd be crazy. But I wonder if we're like how often we're gonna see them next year. Like if there's gonna be a presence of them at races, like speaking to people, networking, stuff like that, because they'll be on the grid in 2026.
Yeah, probably.
So, yeah. Food for thought.
So, I don't think I really have much else to go over, honestly. We'll probably, because it is the holiday season, like last year, we'll probably take the next couple of weeks off just so that we don't run ourselves down to the ground and can spend some time with our family.
And then in January, regroup.
Yes, and we have some exciting plans of things to go over in the new year that we will be recording. And then before you know it, the season will start back up again. And I think winter testing is
End of February.
yeah, end of February. So we have less than 3 months basically until testing
They said
begins.
like 96 days or something.
Yeah, it's less than 100
94.
days.
Yeah.
So. In the meantime, we are still going to continue to try to post on our social media, but we won't be as active as we usually are. We are all caught up with like our our posts. So if you want to go back and take a look at see some of the results in the season, that's going to be there. If anything major happens between now and the next time we actually post a video or podcast episode, that we will be posting it on our social media, probably on our stories. Our stories will probably be the first point of communication access to us. So make sure to check those out. Um, yeah, I think that's everything. It is the end of our our first full season of watching, second season of watching. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say?
No, thanks for watching and following along. It's been a very long season, but I'm happy we got through it.
Next race
Um,
season, for us personally, will be calmer.
Calmer. We're not gonna be in the middle of a move. We're not gonna have family crises. It'll be
I
good.
think you just jinxed us now, but the family
Knock
crisis.
on wood.
But it will be calmer because we will not be moving, thankfully.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So I hope everybody has a happy holiday season, whatever you celebrate. Even if you don't celebrate anything at all, have a happy next couple of
December.
weeks. And you'll hear from us sometime soon.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.